There are moments in life when the noise of the world becomes too loud, when the constant rush of expectations, conversations, and obligations drowns out the quiet voice within us. Finding Strength in Solitude is not just a book, it's a journey into the heart of that silence. It gently takes us by the hand and leads us inward, where true strength, clarity, and purpose are often waiting to be rediscovered. At its core, this book is about transformation, not through chaos or external struggle, but through stillness. It introduces us to the idea that solitude is not loneliness, and being alone is not a curse, but rather a sacred space, a doorway to deeper understanding. The world often teaches us that value is found in connection, in crowds, in productivity, but this book whispers a different truth, that your worth is not dependent on how visible you are to others, but on how connected you are to yourself. We follow the journey of a central character, Ava, a woman who once defined her identity through her relationships, career, and the many roles she played. She was a mother, a wife, a friend, a professional, constantly in motion, constantly available, constantly giving. But somewhere along the way, she lost her sense of self. There was a quiet ache in her soul that no amount of praise, success, or affection could soothe. And then life, as it often does, offered her a pause, not a gentle one, but a painful, necessary interruption. A divorce, a career shift, her children moving away. The silence that followed felt like abandonment at first. But it became something else. As Ava steps into solitude, she initially resists it. She tries to fill it with distractions, endless scrolling, binge-watching shows, reaching out to people out of habit rather than desire. But none of it satisfies the void. And so, finally, she sits with herself. Just sits, and in that sitting, in that brave act of not running away, she begins to hear herself again. This book beautifully illustrates that solitude is not about isolation from others, but reunion with oneself. It is in the still moments, the quiet mornings, the slow walks alone, where Ava begins to remember who she truly is, not in relation to others, but as a soul with her own rhythm, needs, and dreams. She rediscovers simple joys, journaling, gardening, meditating, reading poetry, listening to the wind. These are not distractions, they become acts of self-love, small rituals that reconnect her to her essence. One of the most profound insights from the book is this: solitude teaches us to become our own safe space. For many, the fear of being alone is rooted in the belief that we cannot handle our own thoughts, emotions, or silence. But when we allow ourselves to stay, not flee, we discover that the silence is not empty. It's full of answers. Ava realizes that many of her previous choices were rooted in fear, fear of not being loved, fear of disappointing others, fear of failure. In solitude, those fears rise to the surface, but instead of being drowned by them, she learns to meet them with compassion. She begins to talk to herself not as a critic, but as a friend. There's a moment in the book, simple yet powerful, where Ava is sitting on her porch during sunset, wrapped in a shawl, drinking tea. Nothing extraordinary is happening, and yet, she is overwhelmed by a sense of peace she hasn't felt in years. That moment encapsulates one of the book's core messages: strength is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's quiet. It's the strength to be still, the strength to feel, the strength to begin again. Finding Strength in Solitude also challenges the modern myth that we must always be on, always connected, always responding. It critiques the idea that our value lies in our availability to others rather than our alignment with ourselves. Through Ava's journey, we are reminded that disconnecting from the world is not selfish, it's essential. Not forever, but for long enough to come back to ourselves. Only when we are full within can we give to others without losing ourselves in the process. The book weaves in the wisdom of ancient teachings as well, drawing on the practices of mindfulness, stillness, and inner observation found in philosophies from the East and contemplative traditions of the West. These teachings serve as a backdrop to Ava's transformation, showing that the path she walks has been walked by sages, seekers, and mystics for centuries. And while the world may have changed, the inner terrain of the soul remains timeless. Another key lesson from the book is about boundaries. Solitude teaches Ava where her true energy goes, and where it should no longer flow. She learns to say no, not with guilt, but with grace. She learns that not every call must be answered, not every invitation accepted. This clarity doesn't come from bitterness, but from self-awareness. She is no longer afraid of missing out, because she's finally found something she doesn't want to miss: herself. There's also healing in solitude. Ava reflects on old wounds, childhood insecurities, betrayals, patterns she once ignored. Solitude becomes a space where healing begins. She writes letters she doesn't send. She cries without needing to explain. She forgives, not for others, but to set herself free. This part of her journey is raw and real, and the book doesn't sugarcoat it. Growth in solitude is not always comfortable, but it is always authentic. Eventually, solitude becomes not just a refuge, but a foundation. Ava starts to engage with the world again, but differently. She's no longer performing. Her relationships are more honest, her choices more intentional. She no longer fills her calendar to avoid herself. Instead, she creates a life that honors her pace, her needs, her truth. She begins to attract different people, those who resonate with her authenticity rather than her image. The transformation is subtle yet profound. Ava doesn't become someone else, she becomes more herself. And that is perhaps the greatest power of solitude. It returns us to who we were before the world told us who we should be. Finding strength in solitude invites us all to pause, to stop running long enough to ask ourselves, who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly want when I'm not trying to please? What kind of life feels aligned with my soul, not just my obligations? In a world that often equates solitude with sadness, this book flips the narrative. It tells us that solitude can be sacred. It can be liberating. It can be healing. It is not the absence of connection, it is the restoration of it. Connection with self, with nature, with the divine. And perhaps the most beautiful message of all is this: you don't have to fear being alone. Because within you lives a companion who is wise, whole, and loving, you. When you befriend yourself, you are never truly alone. You carry your own light, and in that light, you find not just peace, but power. This book is more than a story. It is an invitation to step away from the noise, to sit with yourself, to listen deeply. Not to fix or change anything right away, but simply to be. To breathe, to remember. Because when the world grows too loud and life feels overwhelming, the answer may not be to do more, but to do less. To find a quiet space. To close your eyes, and to trust that within your own soul lies the strength you've been searching for all along.